In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Cup Duet Reviews. I am your co-artistic producer, Mackenzie, and today we are talking about one of my personal favorite plays. It is Doubt, a Parable by John Patrick Shanley. This was done by Breaking and Entering Theatre in association with the Church of the Holy Trinity, and it was directed by Stewart Arnott.
Arnott, I think.
Arnott.
I correct us if
Stuart,
we
let
got
us
that
know
wrong.
which one you prefer. But yes, we are here today to discuss this wonderful site-specific production that Ron and I both went and saw on opening night. And of course, you all know my wonderful guest, co-host, man who is also the co-artistic producer, the man who rocks a Flynn shirt better than anybody I know. It is Ryan Borochovitz. Hello, Ryan.
Wow, what a lovely and liturgical introduction there. Thank you for that. Yeah, happy to be here. Love talking about Doubt.
Yes,
It's a good
yes.
show.
It's a very good show. And Ryan, what is in your cup today?
Yeah, so I have the cup. Here we go. And I have coffee in it. I also, in case you can't tell from my voice, I'm getting over a bit of a cold at the moment. So I also have a bottle of water handy to stay hydrated. And if rapid tests can be believed, it is not COVID, so that is good.
There are colds going around. My sister just got over a cold, too. And if you cannot tell by my voice, Mac woke up this morning with a bit of a frog in his throat and his joints are a bit achy. So far, tests are negative, but we will see.
So ain't we just a pair, yeah.
Knock on wood. So today I'm also drinking from the cup, but I have a cup of Earl Grey tea as I felt it was appropriate to be drinking tea today, as there is a very infamous scene where they are talking about lumps of sugar.
How many lumps did you put in yours?
I do not put sugar in my tea. I do honey, or if I have to put sugar, it is usually a spoonful of sugar, as Mary Poppins would want.
Right. Well, there you go. Sister Aloysius would approve of your current beverage choice.
When I was younger, I definitely put more than a spoonful of sugar in my tea, so she would have given me the stern look. But yes, let us get into this piece. Ryan, get us started, though. What is your personal relationship with this play?
Yeah, well, I think you already got us started on this by saying it is your favorite play or one of your favorite plays. I don't know if I'd call it like a favorite, but it's a good one. It's like a really strong play. I've read it many times. In fact, I think this is just of note. We often talk about on this show that outside of the cup, you and I and Jill run this play book club that's kind of been on hiatus for a while, but where us and some other friends get together and read plays aloud and then discuss them. And Doubt actually was the very first play we read in that little ragtag group.
Yes, it's how you and Jill met.
Yes, Jill and I met at that very first meeting of that, and yeah, we had a really awesome discussion about all of the stuff that this play brought up. The fingernails of Father Flynn being one of them. And yeah, so I had already read the play prior to that and had seen the movie a few times. I've also watched a whole community theater production of it that's just on YouTube, because yeah, like after I saw the movie for the first time, having not yet read the play at that point, I wanted to just be like, where can I watch the play? So I remember watching that years ago now. And yeah, this was my first time seeing the play performed live, although I have copious experience with the play, not just the film. How about you?
Well, I mean, I came to this through the film. I remember renting this on a Friday night at my local video store, and the disc was scratched, so it kept skipping over the Viola Davis scene. So, but my mom and I were both like, okay, we know what they're talking about in this.
I don't know, a lot happens in that scene.
There's a lot that happens in that scene. But yes, we talked about that. My mother actually grew up going to school with nuns, so she had a very personalized connection. She actually knew some Sister Aloysiuses in the world as well. And she was like, yeah, they're pretty cold and cruel. They were not nice ladies, who she had. So she very personally connected with the piece. But I then read the play for Play Book Club. And then this was my first time seeing it live, but this has always been a play that has stuck with me. Just how great, intense four-hander piece that really is kind of the minute you're into the story, if it's done really well, it never lets up. And you're just consumed by this piece. It's kind of like 12 Angry Men, where once you see a good production of 12 Angry Men, it's hard not to let that play stick with you. It's one of these plays that kind of, once they get their teeth into you, it's one of those things that, okay, this is going on my directing list. I would love to do a direction of this. I mean, he wanted to do it inside a church, but Breaking Entry Theater beat me to it. But this is a very iconic play. I mean, the movie kind of really ratcheted up its notoriety because, I mean, you have a cast of fantastic, actually, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Viola Davis, Meryl Streep, Amy Adams, like, just the creme de la creme of people there. And I mean, we'll get more into the play itself, but yeah, no, that's my relationship. It was just one of those things of, like many a thing where a play gets adapted into a film, you start there and then you slowly but surely work your way back, so yeah, it's a lot of fun. But yeah, that's my relationship. It's one of these things. I also grew up Catholic, so definitely there were some moments in this play that really kind of made me do a double take a bit in the best way possible. So it was really great. So
well, I also sitting right next to you during opening night of this production, when Father Flynn finished his first sermon, you did the sign of the cross along with him, and
and I even have my rosary in my pocket.
Okay, you came to play, and you are dressed very priest-like at the moment.
Well, my grandmother did want me to be a priest, so
so there you
go. That was a long-lost desire of hers.
You may not be a priest, but you can podcast like a priest. So
I most certainly can. Amen. So there we go. Well, let's get into our overall thoughts of this particular production, because I don't know if Mirvish has done Doubt in a long time. Like I don't know many theater companies who have done this play.
Yeah, so, I don't know about Mirvish specifically. I know CanStage did a production of it shortly after the movie came out. Okay. I did not see that one. I was still I think in high school at the time, but yeah, Mirvish, to my knowledge, hasn't done it. They did this great similarly themed play called The Last Confession with David Suit about the death of Pope John Paul I, which was really interesting. But no, go ahead.
Very interesting history there on that particular Pope. Was he murdered? Was he not murdered?
No, that was the play.
Dun, dun, dun. But yeah, Soren, what are your thoughts on this production?
I think this is a very strong production. I feel like I'm gonna sound fairly negative about some of the stuff about this as we go on, which, as you know, I don't like to do. So, but I do want to kind of lay my cards on the table, at the front, and say that I think this is a very strong production of the play Doubt. I think, all of the actors, all four of them, are very strong. We'll talk about each of them in turn, and at the end of the day, this is a very well written play, kind of perfectly written, in my opinion. It is just so dramaturgically so tight, well constructed, and it does give a lot of really juicy stuff for the actors to play with. So if you've never seen or read Doubt before, and this is happening in your backyard, by all means, do go see it. I think this is it's a great play, and this is pretty much as good as performances of it get. And I might keep clamp down on my thoughts for now and get into more but also in a bit. But yeah, it's a very strong performance of this very strong play, so I do encourage people to check it out.
Yes.
How about you?
For sure. I mean, once again, this was my first time seeing it live. This email came in inviting us to the show, and I immediately was like, Ryan, I'm going. Either you or Jill can join, but this is one of the one of the invites I am personally claiming. So this is definitely what I was excited to see. This play definitely lived up to its expectations. Having read the play in advance, I knew that going in that this was that this isn't a direct adaptation of the film, because the film, once again, when you're adapting any bit of stage work for a film, usually you try and expand the world. So in the film, you get to actually see Donald Mueller, or Miller as they call him in the movie. You get to see the other boys like Katie Horan, and I forget the kid who gets the nosebleed. Jimmy something.
London.
Oh, yes, William
London.
London. There's a few other characters. You also get to meet Sister Veronica and a few of the other nuns. You get a bigger world built in there. But I mean, once again, this play does such a great job that, honestly, you don't really need to see the other elements of the story. This play is strong on its own, in just taking place either on a bench, in a pulpit, or in an office. This is a really tight play. And I think, once again, this play did such a great job, and this production did such a great job of just, once again, having really good pace. So the minute we got into the story, it picks up and moves really fast. That first scene with Sister Aloysius and Sister James, there were some pauses that I was like, okay, what are we doing here? But then the minute Sister James comes back to Sister Aloysius and says, I saw this, that play never lets up for a minute. They were so fast and on the pace of this piece. And this is very much like the Scottish play. You need to have really good pace to sell this piece and to create that environment that makes the audience sit on the edge of their chair. So by the time you get to the big confrontation scene toward the end with Sister Aloysius and Father Flynn, you're literally gripping your seat, like you should feel. They really create this crackling energy about it that was really well done. So I mean, once again, this play gives so much to the actors that as long as you have a good cast who know how to use the text and work it well, you're gonna have a great night at the theater. And this cast was outstanding, and they really knew how to work the piece. They knew how to kind of move on the set, so because this could easily become very bland and stationary, where like Sister James sits here, Sister Aloysius sits behind her desk. There are a few movements I wasn't quite sold on that kind of felt like we're moving for the sake of moving, but a majority of the play, every movement felt like it was a move on the chessboard. Sister Aloysius trying to be kind to Sister James by coming in from behind her desk and trying to talk to her, but then at the same time she's still a cold, shrewd woman. Same thing with like Father Flynn using the whole space. You really kind of felt his presence as the priest throughout the whole piece, and just the little details the director did. Like if you noticed, every time they walked by the I think it's called the sacristy, I think it is, which is where they keep all the dishes and the chalice for communion. Every time either Father Flynn or the sisters walk by it, they genuflect it, which is what you are supposed to do in this world. Like, you see the altar, you genuflect. That is part of the thing. So the fact that they did that, it wasn't really seen because there's a door to the office in the way that really guarded the image. So you had to be at the right angle to catch them. But just the fact the actors did that little detail really kind of meant a lot to me, going, okay, they're really using the space. They're really doing a lot to make sure these characters feel as grounded into the world as they possibly can. The only thing that threw me a little bit was there was no Boston accent. That was the only thing where I'm like, okay, Boston's really definitely an influential. It threw me at first because I'm so used to hearing Meryl Streep, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Amy Adams all doing the kind of their Bostonian sounding accent, that when they didn't do it, I was like, wait, hold on. And I was like, okay, all right. By the time we got to the second scene in, I was fine. But for a minute there, it threw me for a bit.
Yeah, like I definitely noticed that it was gone. I definitely wasn't bothered by it, and part of it is just because, well, again, I'll have things to say later, but like in terms of like what makes this production unique, why here, why now, like we have these top-notch Canadian actors playing by what I would call Stratford rules of you don't do Shakespeare in a British accent, you do it as you talk as a Canadian. So even though, yes, Boston is an important setting in the piece, I was not bothered by its absence here.
Yeah. And I mean, once again, like, historically speaking, there has been as much corruption and evidence of mistreatment in the church in Boston as there's been around the world. There's a great ending image in the film Spotlight that shows each country and the claims that have been made against priests in those countries. And sure enough, Canada's listed on there. It is a number that should not be that high. But, like, it's sad that it is. But so once again, like, once I got into that mindset of, we're playing it straight out, like we're not going for the Boston, we're just going for this is the story. It can be played anywhere in any church, whether it's downtown Toronto, could be up in Muskoka, could be out in BC, could be out on the East Coast, could be in Boston, could be in California.
And
this is a story that applies to everybody. There are always these stories of these situations.
And like if you're talking about the Catholic Church's bad track record with pedophilia in Canada, we need only look at residential schools as this kind of like very like obviously hot button for good reason example thereof.
This is a very solid production. It's running
until November 13th.
So definitely go see this, because this is once again a solid production that you won't be disappointed with. Like, solid cast, solid show. Go on out and see it. It's affordable. It's not $200 to see Harry Potter. This is a very reasonable rate, and it's a solid production. You will not be disappointed. So that's my personal thoughts on the production. But let's dive a little bit deeper, get into the cast. So first off, we're going to talk about Deborah Drakeford, who played Sister Aloysius, who is played in the film by Meryl Streep, just so people who don't quite know the character names, we can associate them with the face they may know. But yes, let's get into Deborah Drakeford's performance. So, Ryan, you can start this.
Yeah, so fans of The Cup might remember the name Deborah Drakeford, because if you saw our episode on Gloria at Crow's Theatre, or just saw Gloria, she played the titular Gloria in that, in Nan, because there was some fun double casting. So this is, it's always fun when we review shows on the Cup that have, actors recur, because then we get to sort of plot trajectories of performance careers and, how maybe, not to bring Marvin Carlson into the discussion, but how seeing someone in another performance kind of informs the way we view them, this haunting, the spectrality of it all. So yeah, Deborah Drakeford did a great job. Like, I think she had the perfect kind of stern coldness that really is the defining trait of the character. She is steadfast from beginning to end, until the very end, of course. Yeah. But yeah, she really brought this rigidity and humor to the role, which I think is something that often does get lost. You think of this character who really is just the stone cold badass nun but there's a lot of really like great genuine comic moments and timing that she really did find very well. And it was all just like in the eye movements, the tilts of the head, the pause, of course, listening to the little transistor radio. And so, I think she did a great job. And before I pass it on to you, that I really did admire about her performance, and I think this applies to pretty much everyone in the cast, but I like how she wasn't doing a Meryl Streep impression. That because Meryl Streep's performance is iconic in this. All four of the actors are in the film, and it could be very tempting to just study that performance and be like, okay, this is the definitive way of performing this character, I will do that. And I will say, like, I wouldn't be surprised if she sat down watching the film pen in hand and wrote, okay, Meryl did this, so I will do differently. And there are moments where I think that really pays off. There's other moments where I'm like, okay, I really love the decision Meryl makes in that moment, and you didn't do that. I don't think it's a bad thing because you didn't do that, but I can't help comparing it in my head. Like, honestly, if I could, talk about my favorite acting decision in the entire film, just for a moment. After Father Flynn says that, like, tells that, oh yeah, Donald stole the altar wine and I covered for him, and Sister James is like, oh, that explains everything, thank God. And like, do we have to kick him off the altar, boys? And Sister Aloysius says, with this just kind of like beautiful expression of defeat mixed with snapping back into her responsibility, well, he can't stay on the altar, boys. If like, I obviously cannot, I cannot impersonate it because I'm not Meryl Streep. But like, it's just that line breaks me. Just like the brilliance of Meryl Streep's acting there. And so, what I'll say about Deborah's performance here is that, like, in that moment, she made a very different acting decision to that. She said, like, she kind of kept up that sternness of snapping right back into, if he drank altar wine, he cannot still be an altar boy. And while I admire taking a different position with it, part of me misses that real crucible of mixed emotions that we see in the film. So that's not a slight against Deborah's performance. It's just a consequence of having such an iconic performance to compare it against.
Yes. Yeah, I'll follow up on you on that one. Is Meryl Streep left big shoes to fill. I mean, it's hard not to think of the character and not think of Meryl Streep, the Dragon Lady, who just so great at terror. I mean, you forget the same year she did Mamma Mia. Like, totally 180 performances there. But she was so scary in that role in the best way. And Deborah did such a great job, as you said, just kind of treading her own course. There are some moments that certainly lend themselves to being Meryl Streep did this really well, so can't really improve on what's already there. And yet there were moments that you really tried to differentiate yourself. Like just that final line she has of, and cut your nails, right? Like Meryl Streep in such a throwaway way, but the venom that Deborah laced into that line was so cutting. It was like her
Juan. It was the like character intention there.
Exactly. Sure. It was really her dropping the axe, the executioner's axe on top of Father Flynn there in that final moment. And then to see just the 180 turnaround from her being so venomous in that last line to then having a breakdown in the garden. Where you realize, oh, she was really putting up a front. And just the, like, there's always the actor decision in this play of, does Sister Aloysius have her lie in place before Father Flynn walks into the room? Or is it something she makes on the spot? And Deborah did such a great job of doing the 9 steps that Sister Aloysius takes that shows, in her interpretation, this is the way I read it, was she makes it up on the spot and builds the lie up on the spot. That is a bit more of an improv line than it was a calculated move to get him. And so, but just, once again, her eyes, and just, it's like, people forget, like, when they watch, I mean, it's kind of seen in the background, but when you watch this play, particularly the nuns, they're wearing the habits, like the old habits. So it's like, it's very kind of restricted into what you can see. You can't really see their body language because they're all draped in black.
Yeah.
And then the heads are very restricted because of the habit they're wearing.
Which she never takes off the entire performance.
She never does.
Mm-hmm.
She stays in it, but just the way she was able to emote with such limited ability in the sense of physicality, like, because that character is so rigid and so stoic in what she believes that it's impossible to convey so much in so little, but she did it. Just that split second you see her, Father Flynn's about to leave, and she comes up with that lie of, I called your past prayers and spoke with a nun. Like, just you can see the whole plan or her whole idea coming to fruition in that one split second on stage. And it's something you may miss because you're watching Father Flynn in that moment, so you may miss it. But just watching her and making that decision and showing that in this interpretation, it was a split second decision in that she's kind of flying by the seat of her habit. It totally works. And so she did such a great job in this. I mean, once again, this is a hard role. I would say out of all the roles in the play, because it's Meryl Streep who did the role, it's such a big shoe to fill. Like Amy Adams, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Viola Davis also did a lot of great work. But really, it's Meryl Streep.
It's her. Kind of, and yeah, something that I feel like people don't necessarily like think about or appreciate enough is that she is like simultaneously Hercule Poirot and, well, I guess maybe Sherlock Holmes is the better character to say because of who I'm going to say. She's Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty in the same character.
Yes, she is.
That she is like both the detective who we follow in this kind of mystery story, but she's also the villain in a sense. Now I think we're primed to think of Father Flynn as the villain, but he is this like charming, charismatic guy, whereas she is this no-nonsense. I represent the modernity or the resistance to modernity that the church is kind of flailing against at this particular historical juncture. Yes. And yeah, she just did that really well. And Meryl Streep obviously did it well, but we don't need to pit them against each other anymore than we already have.
Great interpretations. Yeah. But we start talking about Father Flynn, so let's get into him. So Brian Bisson played Father Flynn in this, and we should note that Brian is also, where is he here? He is also the co-artistic director of the company. So he's stepping into where there's a note that was sent out that he also was an altar boy back in the day. So he definitely has a lot of connections to this piece in multiple ways. So Ryan, what did you think of him?
Okay, so I feel like we have to just compare all of these actors to their movie counterparts, which we'll talk about why we have to do that maybe in a bit. But like, I think, Brian's performance as Father Flynn doesn't suffer from that comparison in the same way that Deborah's of Sister Aloysius does. And suffer is probably the wrong word because she certainly doesn't suffer. Yeah. But whereas she's doing something kind of, or just maybe in terms of her like physicality and the rigidness of the character, she's forced to be very similar to Meryl Streep's performance and therefore
little wiggle room.
Yeah, and therefore I think had to do that like more nuanced work that I described that I imagined of like, okay, she did it this way, I'll do it that way, because otherwise we're very much the same. Brian's performance as Father Flynn is very different because he's just so different from Philip Seymour Hoffman. And like, just as a, a presence, as a physicality, as a persona, like, just his appearance is very different, and like the timbre of his voice and all of that, I think, makes us, we're still inclined to draw these comparisons because we have the version to compare against, but it's less, one-to-one in my view. And as a result, I was quite pleasantly surprised at how different he made this character and how, he's charming and likable, and he really like presents himself in like, certainly like the sermon scenes are a big part of it, but also, I think the basketball gym coaching scene is a big part of it too, where he just seems like this very down-to-earth guy that you can like, what we always say about politicians, I'd like to have a beer with him, but like, but it kind of really does, make it clear that why someone like Donald Muller would gravitate towards him and why he kind of does project this sort of charming enthusiasm that you really do feel like you could relate to. And if he is, on one hand, representing this kind of the modernity that the church was pushing for at this particular historical moment, like, he kind of seems like you always think about like the youth pastor with the acoustic guitar kind of vibe, and like that very much is the vibe he gave off, which certainly is able to be intimidating when it needs to, but really kind of the argument for his innocence is sold by just how likable and innocent and, unthreatening he seems, which could make it very scary when he does occasionally turn threatening, and certainly you don't need to project threateningness to be a threat, as, I'm sure many priests in the world are, without kind of projecting something as intimidating as Philip Seymour Hoffman's performance. But yeah, sorry, I'm rambling a bit. Would you like to kind of jump onto this?
Yeah, I mean, I will say for me, growing up, going to church, there definitely was more of a father who was on the Sister Aloysius, traditional, colder side. And then we did have another father who was much more modern. Like, there's a very famous memory I have of him where he's explaining the whole concept of the point of an ant. And he actually got down on the ground and crawled around as an ant to make his point. As you do. But he was very good, very charismatic, and I mean, nobody ever came out and spoke out against him, so
that's good.
I'm not implying anything there. It's just that he had that very kind of gregarious modern energy that Father Flynn does have to display in order to sell this story. And I mean, I think the one thing that Brian has that in a bit worked against him in my way, which was, if you ever watch like Law and Order or some of those crime shows, there's always the kind of creepy neighbor that looks a little bit too Mr. Rogers and too well put together. I mean, looking behind him over my shoulder there. Like, he kind of looks kind of almost too well coiffed, and there's an unsettling energy about that sometimes. Like that whole basketball speech, there was a bit of that uneasy feeling I had where, like, couldn't quite read him, which was great. That's what I want. And then when he gets to the end of the big confrontation speech and he breaks down in tears, I was like, oh, you've added more layers to this. You're not playing him as just what I feel more Philip Seymour Hoffman did, which was Philip Seymour Hoffman played him as very much a guilty man. Brian played him more, I felt more guilt with Philip Seymour Hoffman, that there was something a bit more nefarious with his interpretation of Father Flynn than Brian. Brian, I felt, we'll get into this at the end. There's different headcanons you can make up for this character. And I definitely felt Brian made a more sympathetic headcanon, a more innocent headcanon, and that came across in that final breakdown that he has at the end. So, and it made me not be so angry at the church at the end when he gets the promotion to whatever it's St. Jerome's. I think he goes to St. Jerome's at the end. Like, usually, like when I watch the film, I get angry when I hear that Philip Seymour Hoffman got the promotion and got moved, because it just shows the hypocrisy of the church in those situations. But in this, I felt like, oh, I actually was more on the Sister James side, where she says, I believe him. Like, by the end, there was part of me that actually did kind of go, there's part of me that wants to believe you're good. Like, Phil Seymour Hoffman, I'm just like, nah. There's something off about him, and he's just, once again, he plays it there, like, he's not playing it mustache twirling evil, but there is something unsettling about his performance, and maybe it's because we do see his relationship with the other boys, and in the backstage behind the church, like him giving the toy to Donald and things like that, like doing a few more things that kind of make it seem a bit more black and white versus gray. And Brian really leaned into the gray and really kind of gave a very thought-provoking performance that left me kind of going, I don't quite know how to feel about you. There's one part of me that wants to believe you're good, in that you kind of got railroaded. There's another part of me that should be going on the lines of, you were caught, you're bad, you're out. Like, it really did leave me with doubts, as they say. So, no, it was a solid performance, and he had it right when he walked in, like, as you say, when he did the sign of the cross. Me being the good church-going person I am, being in the church setting with and him looking so priest-like with his robes, it was just natural for me to kind of start doing it in the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, So that was something where, like, I just instinctively did, because I believe Brian as a priest. I could see him being a very good priest and being someone who could speak to the youth, connect with them in a genuine way, that type of thing. So yeah, solid performance there by him. He definitely gave me a lot to chew on afterwards. Definitely gave me a lot to think about in that performance. Okay, awesome. Let's get into the next performer, which is Emma Nelles, and she played Sister James, who in the film was Amy Adams. So Ryan, what are your thoughts on this performance of Sister James?
Okay, so this is the one where I feel like she was the closest to her movie counterpart in terms of the way she was performing and the decisions she was making. And, like, to my knowledge, I don't believe I've ever seen this performer before, so I don't necessarily, like Deborah, have another...
She's done a lot.
Yeah, and like, and maybe I have. It's kind of also hard to recognize underneath the habit. Like, oh yeah, if I hadn't seen Gloria so recently, I don't know, would I have remembered that? Oh yeah, Deborah's the same. Right. Like, that was only like a year ago. Like,
yes.
So yeah, maybe I've seen Emma Nelles before, but like not specifically remembering that. Like, it's hard for me to compare, like, is this an affect that she's putting on to kind of be, oh, so innocent, like Amy Adams, or is she very much like, or is that just how she performs? And like, either is fine. I don't have that frame of reference. Now, while I've said with both of the other performers, I really do admire how they've very deliberately, I think, tried to differentiate themselves from their film counterparts. Yeah. I don't think it's really a problem that Emma hasn't done that same legwork is probably the wrong word, but like that same kind of differentiation tactics. Because like, it's, of the three principal characters, she's the one who very much, is not steadfast, like in this sort of tripartite. She very much represents the idea of, being unsure, having doubts, constantly being ping-pong between the two people. And she is an audience avatar in that way, and I think it's okay if we kind of have her as more of this blank slate, is probably the wrong way of putting it, but this vessel that we can pour ourselves into. So, like, and I think that the Amy Adams mold of performer very much fits that. I do still think that there were moments, maybe she did that same hypothetical exercise that I described Deborah doing in my head, where like, I loved the scene. She's finally kind of talking back to Sister Aloysius a little bit about, like, you know what? I like Frosty the Snowman, and I love teaching history, and I hate that you, like, maybe, like, I think she went further with that than Amy Adams does. And what I really like about it is Amy Adams looks like she's, like, on the verge of tears, like, it's very hard for her to even say these things to her superior, whereas I really liked Emma took pride in, okay, I've gotten started, I'm going, and you know what? Screw you. Like, like it. And then, of course, she gets put in her place instantly because we are not in ancient Sparta. But I really I loved the light in her eye in that moment, like, while she was really doing that. And like, I think she sells the role really well. And the fact that she was the most similar to her film counterpart isn't like a slight against the performance at all.
Yeah, I definitely will say Sister James, who we've had Jill read in our play readings, and she complained about how restrictive that role is. Like, Sister Aloysius has a lot of scenery to chew on. Sister James is, God bless Shanley for writing this character based off his real life teacher, Sister. I think her name also was Sister James. But basically, like, that nun inspired him to write this character in this play. So God bless him for that. But Sister James is definitely the most, I don't know if the word blank is correct, but definitely the most kind of neutral based character, where there's only so much you can read and do with that character, because once again, you're in a nun's habit, you're in a subjected role, because you're basically on the bottom of the totem pole between the father and the head and nun. So you're kind of stuck ping-ponging, and it's more of a reactionary role than it is a driving role. So there's always so much you can do. But I definitely will say she did as much as she could, like having her, as you said, her outburst after the tea scene, where she kind of lets Sister Aloysius have it. She definitely leaned into the audience cheer moment of, if it was appropriate, the audience would cheer for Sister James' moment for finally standing up for herself. There's something you're willing her to do throughout the whole play, which is, don't let these other two people drive you, make your own opinions. But that's kind of the tragedy of the character, is she can't. Like, she's kind of stuck, just like the real church was in the 1960s, stuck between the classic qualities of the church and the modernism that was starting to brew underneath. And we've talked about that off mic in our playbook club chats, which is Sister James really is the character that has to ping pong the most and do a lot of legwork to make the relationships really come alive. Like, if you don't have a good Sister James, those long scenes of dialogue don't work, because you need somebody who can do a really good job reacting to what the others are influencing her on, to really kind of give the proper responses that are needed. And that's definitely something that Emma did. Like, whether it's that first scene where she's being told, you gotta be colder, gotta be more aloof. Like, don't fall for the lies that the students tell you. Like, and the constant put downs that she's getting thrown at by Sister Aloysius. Then you have the scene where she has to be convinced by Father Flynn of his innocence, right? So there has to be a journey in that scene. And that's definitely something there. So definitely Emma did as much as she possibly could with a role that really is even more restrictive than Sister Aloysius. So I definitely will say Emma did a lot with that. And I really did feel for her. Like when she's breaking down because she's so torn and so chewed up by both sides of this system going after her. But she has to get away to go help her brother. Like, you feel for her. And that's the point, is you have to feel for Sister James in this moment where she is wanting to believe in the good. But as we know, the world is not always made up of good-hearted people. There's people who will take advantage of a good heart and will manipulate the system to take over that element. So, like, it's very important that you have someone like that who's feeling the torn. Because as an audience, we should all want to be believing the goodness of these authority figures. We shouldn't be wanting to feel so doubtful of Father Flynn. But as a good play does, you do come away feeling doubt, because you don't know if it's done right, which way it's going. And that's the same thing with this play. So Emma did a really great job feeling that. And just the way that by the end of the play, the power dynamic switches, and it's Sister Aloysius who's having the breakdown. And unlike what Sister Aloysius did, when she turned her back on Sister James, saying, you only want the world to go back to normal. That's why you're trying to be kind and lighthearted, when really you should be cold like me. And yet in the moment where Sister Aloysius really needs a companion, someone to show her some kindness and give her some comfort in her time of doubt, it's Sister James, who does the one thing that Sister Aloysius told her not to do, which is have a heart. So I think that's the really important moment, is there has to be a power switch in that when at the end, when Sister Aloysius says, I have doubts, and she breaks, and it's Sister James who's there to catch her. There has to be a really good, strong power shift where you feel the change of dynamic between the two of them in those final moments. And that's something Emma did really well with Deborah in that final scene, which you definitely felt there was an equalizing or a shift in power that everyone should see a sequel play of what do Sister Aloysius and Sister James get up to after they got rid of Father Flynn. Like, what's next?
They just hug on that bench for the rest of their lives. Yeah.
It becomes a Waiting for Godot type play. What's his name? My brain is so foggy today. Ibsen? Is it Ibsen?
Samuel Beckett?
Beckett. It becomes this Beckett play of the nuns waiting for the doubt to go away. So they just sit on the bench the whole time. Ryan, write that play.
I don't think it needs to be written. You can write it if you have the vision.
I do not have the skill to write that good. Shanley, you do it.
Yeah.
There we go. Let's get into our final cast member, who was terrific. It is Kim Nelson as Mrs. Mueller. And this was the role that Viola Davis played. And I believe it got her first Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actress for one scene.
Yes.
And I mean, we'll get into
scene-stealing scene. Yeah.
So, yeah, exactly. It's a very much a big scene-stealing scene. So, Ryan, you start out with this one.
Yeah, she's great. All four of them are great. Shocker. This company, it's their debut production, and they're kind of kicking down the door strong by just getting all of these really talented, accomplished Canadian actors together. And of course, Kim Nelson is great in this role that, once again, I think similar to Brian as Father Flynn, there's a very clear differentiation between her performance and Viola Davis's performance. Yes. She's definitely, she looks very different from her. She sounds very different from her. Yes. And she is, definitely not doing an impression, which... No, there's no snot crying. No, there is no snot crying, which I know has become a cliche with Viola Davis's performances at this point, but...
Hey, it's great. You're in it for a good performance when Viola Davis.
Yeah, when she is snotting all over the screen.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, but I thought she just did... I feel like there was a lot more, quiet is probably the wrong word, but, subtle is probably more what I'm driving at here. Yes. Whereas... she didn't get very big, or there were very few moments where she got big and loud. Yes. She came in and she very much, the fact that she felt like she's being interrogated when is really not how you should feel when you're being told that I think something horrible is happening to your son. Yeah. You should feel like, I'm informing you so we can take action, but she's I know how these things go. I know that the world is stacked against me here, and why the line that she kind of keeps bringing up is why am I sitting in the principal's office and not the priest if the priest is the one who did something wrong? And I think that tension that she really she into it is very strong, and just the heartbreaking repeating of it's only till June, which is just devastating. And she came to play, and it really paid off.
Absolutely. I mean, once again, this is a scene-stealing performance if you have the right person in the role. And there's so much in this scene to get into, and it's heartbreaking. And yeah, Kim played the role really strong. She didn't fall apart in tears. There were moments where you definitely could see she was wanting to break, but she was a very stoic Mrs. Mueller. Like, she is there carrying the weight of this world on her shoulders, knowing it's implied very clearly that Donald is gay, and that she knows this, and she has accepted this, and is doing her best to just get her son to the next step. Because she sees the future for him, like, get him into college, like, he can get there. If he has the right steps in place. And this is a necessary step, is to get him through to the end of June. And that stoicness of standing up to the world when there's someone shouting at you, there is a shark in the water going after your child, and she has to sit there and go, let the shark take my child, because he wants to get caught, he needs a friend, whether that friend has good intentions or not. I have to let what's transpiring, because it's only for a few more months, come what may from that decision. And it's heartbreaking, because you can't imagine any parent would sanction what is being implied that is happening between Donald and Father Flynn. But once again, it's one of those great characters of, she is kind of stuck in the middle like Sister James, going, there is one man who is good to my son. His father doesn't like him, his classmates don't like him, you don't really like him or care about him. But there's one man, and it's Father Flynn. And if that means that he's doing something inappropriate, then I will bite the bullet on that, because Donald isn't upset by it. Donald hasn't come to me crying saying, the Father Flynn's done this to me, which implies to her that maybe, once again, he's accepting this relationship, if there is one. And that's tough. I mean, that's a very tough line to walk as a performer, where you don't want to come across as Machiavellian and just cold as a parent, but at the same time, you don't want to come across as sobbing, like totally broken, because this is a very strong woman who lives with an abusive husband, from what we understand. She has a son who is gay, and she's got the whole community that she's supposed to be welcomed by, who is very much not welcome, because it's 1960s in Boston, when we are right at the cusp of a decade full of civil rights riots and protests. Like, we are right on the early cusp of that. Like, we know this takes place right after, a year after JFK is shot, because they talk about it in the opening sermon. So we're in this really high time of flux where there was a lot of shit going down in the world, and Mrs. Muller's approach is, keep my head down, keep Donald's head down, let's just get through to whatever that next step is. Do not rock the boat, do not, and that's a tough line to walk. That could be something that could make the audience really not like you as a character. Because any parent worth their salt would sit up and go, no person touches my child, whether their intentions are good or not. Like, nobody touches my child. And so the fact that we have a character who's willingly letting this happen, or is willingly turning a blind eye for what she views as the greater good, that's a lot to carry from a one-scene character. I mean, there's a great spin-off play right there of the story of Mrs. Mueller and what she gets up to. Because you only get it for one scene, but there's a lot that goes on. Is there a play about her and Donald having private conversations on their own between these other scenes that are taking place in another spot? You never know. So
part of me kind of, as much as I'd like to spend more time with this character, like, part of me doesn't necessarily want that play to exist, because I feel like that might provide too many definitive answers to the things that this play leaves up in the air so well.
I mean, this character is described, I've seen people describe her as like the Anita character in West Side Story, who comes on stage, hits a home run, and gets the hell off the stage, and leaves the audience wanting more. Yeah. And that's what this role is.
She definitely
You come on stage, you have a really powerful scene, and then you're out, and then you have the award attention for just one really powerful scene. So, yeah, Kim, you did a great job once again.
Yeah.
Really.
Shout out to the whole cast.
Yeah, shout out to the whole cast. There was not a weak link in this cast. You can tell they had really good chemistry, spent a lot of time doing some form of table reads or studying the text together to really kind of get the nuances of this performance. So, well done. Well done. Okay, let's get into what our favorite production or design element was, and we should note that this is a unique production because it is a site-specific production performed in an actual church. So, Ryan, give us your thoughts on the site-specificness of the piece, and what was your favorite element? Even though there wasn't really a ton of elements to really
go after.
Go after.
So something you said earlier, like I think pretty close to like introducing the play, is this idea of performing in a church. You said, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said it was an idea you had and then this production stole it. Like, is that something that you had like legitimately like thought of and maybe even intended of like doing one day, like prior to knowing about
There's always a part of me that goes, this would be a great play to do inside an actual church. But I mean, my choice would actually have you move around the church. Like sometimes you're in the main church, sometimes you're actually sitting like as flies on the wall in Sister Aloysius' office.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're outside. Like, I don't know. Either way, the point being is, this play definitely opened the door to me thinking, if a church would allow you to do it, and that's the other big thing, is you need a church who's willing to tackle this subject matter and will let you willingly come in and do this play, which is not a great play with what it infers about Father Flynn and the coldness of Sister Aloysius. Like, there definitely is some negative detractors about this play toward the Catholic Church. So the fact that this church allowed them to come in and do this is really great. So I applaud the site for that.
Yeah. So I wholeheartedly agree with your kind of more sleep no more, like roaming idea about like, let's actually go into like an office and see that kind of like thing. Let's, if we did want to have the scenes in the courtyard, let's go there. Like, whereas I think part of me didn't love the site specificity of doing it in the church. Partly, I don't think it's because of how the fact that we still did a proscenium style, very much like planted in your seat, beginning to end. But in the sermon scenes, it worked great because in that context, you very much are sitting in a chair, watching a man give a speech in this exact type of space. So when in those moments, it worked really well. Yeah. So the acoustics, like, while they're great for having this like booming voice of I am sermonizing and I want you all to hear, I don't think it lends itself to every single scene in this play, where a lot of them are very much like hushed voice. We are talking about things we shouldn't, and we need to be discreet. And when there is a palpable echo in every single scene because of the nature of the space, like there are so many moments that pay very acute detail to is the door open a crack? Is it closed? Do we have privacy? And I really don't feel like having this booming echo, which sounds great and certainly lends itself to the sermons, doesn't really seem like it fits in a lot of the more cloak and dagger dynamics here.
Yes.
Like, and I also, I guess, just, maybe part of this is me not having the same relationship to Catholicism in the church as someone like you has, but like, I certainly went to synagogue as a kid, but like, I guess that space maybe, while it doesn't necessarily evoke the same things for me, it's something I guess I just struggle with site-specific theater in general that doesn't like take the effort to really move the audience around the site, or at least stay in a single fictional setting alongside this, like, the actual phenomenological setting of here, because it's in some moments saying like, we are reducing the semiosis that's happening here, that like the scene is set in a church, it's in a church, you're sitting in a church, but then when other scenes are set in a high school gym or in a principal's office or a courtyard, you still have to expend that semiotic energy and suspend that disbelief, which isn't a problem, that's how theater works, but it just seems like I would rather be in a theater for those scenes than in that big church space, so I find that kind of does undercut the effect a bit. But I don't know, did you have thoughts of your own about?
I mean, for me, once again, the costume design was terrific. The fact we had real priest robes and nuns' habits, that all really helped inform the time and the place. Definitely by having the setting inside the church, you really did feel like Sister Aloysius continually talks about how there's no one for her to turn to. The Monsignor's no help, she can't go to the bishop. There's a system in place that actively represses her, and she lost her one ally from a previous church a while ago, so she has nobody to really turn to help her in this. And the fact that it was just this, you're in the main part of the church, we have these big high voltage ceilings and like the big painted words of like, oh God, oh lovely God, or whatever that phrase was, I can't remember verbatim, but just this big old space that just felt like, it could have been that, I'm pretty sure that church is from the 60s or earlier. It's a pretty old church, but like you just felt the weight of the system on her at all times. But I do agree that I really would have loved to have seen them use a bit more of the space to really create that cloak and dagger feel, because there were certain moments where like the actors got really big and really loud because they're yelling at each other. Then they had to stop and let the echo dissipate because the acoustics are so echoey in that space that like when Sister Aloysius and Father Flynn really get into it, like the I've never touched a child, you have, and it's like that you have just echoed, and it did have a cool effect in the moment of, oh wow, like the accusations are ringing in Father Flynn's ears, if you want to read it that way. But also at the same time, it was suggested to us that by another audience member who was there that this plays a lot should be feeling claustrophobic. Like when Mrs. Mueller goes into Sister Aloysius's office, it should feel as though the walls are closing in on these two. Mm-hmm. As Mrs. Mueller is having to face the truth of what is going on and having to have her choice of accepting the fate of Donald in that moment. Like, it should feel claustrophobic. And because we're in such a big space, some of that claustrophobicness was lost. But as you said, there were certain other moments that really worked really well. So I thought the site was beautiful. It's a beautiful old church right next to the Eden Center, so it's like going back in time, which was really kind of a cool effect. But at the same time, maybe they didn't have permission, and it was like, you only get to use this one room, this one space, so do with it what you will. And that was that. But even then, like, if they have permission to go further, I would totally have supported that, because once again, this play is all about cloak and daggers, accusations, and the whispers that go around in these spaces, So they could have gone further, but I think for what they did do, it was solid. Like, it definitely didn't disappoint me. Like, I definitely felt, as I said, the imposing structure of the system always surrounding Sister Aloysius, where there's literally nowhere for her to turn, because she's trapped with the door on one side, and then she's got the audience looking at her on the other side. There's really nowhere for her to turn to. She's literally, the whole system is surrounding her. And that's really what I'm sure a lot of people who wanted to make changes in this time, because we should say there were good people in the world who did try and help. But once again, the system is set up to aid the wrong people. So
I guess where I maybe have a little more like of a dissenting opinion on this is, well, and I guess maybe this kind of just goes into more of the play itself than necessarily this production, but I don't feel like Sister Aloysius is trapped by like the history of the church that envelops her, at least in this production here. Like, she is a creature of that environment. She does not want the church to change. Yes. That 100-year-old stained glass window, that is like her beating heart. Like, yeah. And so while she's certainly trapped by the patriarchal underpinning of the church hierarchy, that's, she supports it in theory, but not in the practice of how it inhibits her to make the specific, ultimately conservative changes that she wants. While, pedophilia aside, her conflict with Father Flynn really just stems from, he's too progressive and I don't like him. He shouldn't be playing Frosty the Snowman at the pageant. He should be playing hymns. Like, so, yeah, like, I guess that's where I kind of come as, I don't see that, like, seeing that big, like, banner in the stained glass. Very much felt like she's in her element there, but then the plot doesn't necessarily support having those surroundings all around. Like, I loved the thing you said about, like, ooh, that echo, it's like, you can interpret it as ringing in his ears, and I think that's great. I didn't think that at the time. I just kind of thought, wow, it's like the end of A Doll's House, the door slamming around the world, but that's not what happens here, because there is, like, very little material change that comes about based on ousting this one priest. He gets a promotion at another parish. So it's really shouldn't have that reverberation of triumph that we get, like, with that echo, as I read it.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Once again, like, the site gave a lot to think about, but I think you and I both agree we would have loved to have seen them go even further and use the space even more, because there's so much there to do and chew on with being able to actually do this piece in a real church. So there's lots to do. So once again, this play gives a lot.
Yeah, like, it's an interesting choice. I know I've been negative on it, but, like, I think it's certainly a reasonable thing to do with this play, which I'll talk more about in a second, but, like, it's, to me, it didn't fully work, I guess, is just what I'll say.
Yeah, like, I mean, definitely, yeah, we'll go with that for now. I may come back to that one. Yeah. Okay, perfect. Well, let's get into the next point, which, Brian, you've labeled Brian's big critique. What can we do, in all caps, with doubt? So, Ryan, I'll let you lead this.
So, okay, I guess I've been hinting about this pretty much from the start, but, like, I thought this was a very top-notch production, as indicated by the praise I've given it, and specifically the praise for the actors. And that's what you come to see. You see these actors doing their thing. And as I said in my initial statement, that if you've never seen Doubt before, this is a great opportunity to see Doubt. Doubt's great. But as much as I appreciate the performances that we saw and the performance as a whole, I kind of left the theater, or the church theater, feeling, okay, I've seen Doubt, but I've seen Doubt before. Right. And it's the why this play now type question, but and, I really wanted to preface a lot of this with, walking through our own personal relationships to this very well-known play, and specifically the movie that goes with it, because this might just be me, and maybe I'm weird in this way, but I think that the great merit of this piece is just the script. It is a dramaturgically perfectly constructed script, in my opinion. But I get the same excitement and feeling just reading this script quietly to myself that I do from seeing even a great performance like this one. That I don't really feel like, for whatever reason, and we can talk about the reasons in a second, but for whatever reason, even seeing these great actors do it very strongly doesn't necessarily elevate the material any more than it's already elevated, because it's already so strong. And as a result, I can't help looking at a production like this whose really only, stylistic creative choice is what if Doubt but in church. Okay, but why do we need more productions of Doubt? Right. And especially because the movie exists. And the movie, in my opinion, is this definitive version that I would argue eclipses all stage versions that come after. That the fact that we could not talk about any of these actors without comparing them to their film counterpart, I think says a lot. So, and that's the thing, the play being so well written and so tightly constructed really doesn't give a lot of freedom for big creative decisions to be made. It is set in a very specific time and place, so right off the bat you can't be, what if it was set in a different time and place, because, well, that's kind of very inherent to the story. Yes. And I don't know if Shanley's estate would even allow anything dramaturgically like that to be done to it, nor do I think they should, because it's kind of perfect how it is. So if the most creative things you could do with it is, hey, what if it's set in the place where it's also supposed to be set fictionally, plus, okay, actors watch the movie and write down what they did, so you do something different. I don't know. I'm kind of at a loss to think, what can we do with this play? Why even do this play? If I want to, expose someone to this play, I don't feel like I'm going to be inclined to say there's a great production that's happening in the city right now. Go see it. I think it's great. But I would say watch the movie or just read the play to yourself. Yeah. And if you really aren't the kind of person who likes reading plays, and not everybody does, then fine, go see this. So I don't know. I'm torn, because as much as I enjoyed the production, I think, I don't know. Something I did want to bring up in this discussion is I have the e-program here. Yep. And they have this little about the play section that I will read a portion of. Yes. And because I think, maybe this is an attempt at answering my why this play now. And though the play is set in 1964 and written almost 2 decades ago, Doubt's relevance cannot be denied. Looking at the issues that have taken up our hearts and minds these last 2 years, the Catholic Church's involvement in residential schools and child abuse scandals, which I mentioned earlier, racial reckonings, class struggles, the value of women, is it any wonder we all have doubts? Doubt in our leaders, doubt in our faith, doubt in ourselves, and we have been left to deal with the doubts on our own, as well as we remained in COVID isolation. But now we can face these doubts head on together. And so lots of great points made there. And I think, yes, a lot of the questions that this play raises certainly are present in today's culture. I don't think this play has aged poorly, or that, don't do Doubt because it's been done, and therefore has nothing to say to us now. Clearly, it's a modern classic for a reason. But I guess my answer to that is, well, watch the movie if you like want to engage with like this specific, parable as a way of engaging with the way we have doubt in our leaders and the church and authorities and in this way. Like, and that last word that I quoted feels very important. This "let's deal with it together" is very much an argument for, well, when you watch the movie, you're alone, you're behind the screen, but this play doesn't provoke explicit dialogue. Like, it's like you and I are obviously having dialogue about it now, and we talked with another acquaintance of ours in the audience, but at the end of the day, I don't really feel like the communion, the theatrical ritual of sharing this experience with other people adds much to it, unless you are explicitly going to have a complex discussion about the ethics of the church and its history. And I feel like you can have that discussion with friends just as easily by watching the movie or reading the play aloud, like we did a few years ago in that play book club. So now, part of me, I don't know if you saw it. There was, what was it? It's a German production, but it was done at Tarragon, in English translation, of Ibsen's An Enemy of the People a number of years ago now. Yeah, and what's kind of this German production by Thomas Ostermeyer did the adaptation, and then Richard Rose and co. adapted it for Toronto, does something very interesting where there's a town hall scene where they're discussing water contamination, and they open that town hall up to the audience, where they actually allowed people in the audience to ask questions to the politicians and kind of treat yourself like you're in the fiction of the world of the play. And maybe something like that is what you can do with doubt. If you really want to work through these ideas together, find a place in the script where we can open it up to, I don't know how you do it that it's not cheesy, but open it up to, what do you think? Is he guilty? Do you have any questions you want to ask Father Flynn? Now's your chance. Almost because of the accusations, Father Flynn holds a town hall where he's going to put all of this to rest and let you... No, I don't think it fits within this play per se, but that's something that I think you could, it's an idea. If anyone wants it, I'm not going to do it, obviously, but if Shanley's estate even allows it, but I say estate, he's still alive, but but yeah, so I don't know. I love this play. I'm glad I got to see this, but I'm also, if Jill wasn't out of town and she went to see this with you instead and was doing this review, I don't think I would have been like, shucks, I missed Doubt. I've seen Doubt. I've seen the definitive Doubt with some of the world's greatest actors. Yeah. So, I don't know. Yeah. What about you?
Wow, there's a lot there. Okay, so for me, we talked about this a little bit after we left the show, and I was left thinking about it, and I went, what you kind of said is kind of the same thing I kind of go with 12 Angry Men. That's such a well-written play, and there's only so much you can do with that play, whether it's a casting choice or a setting choice. It's 12 people, usually men or a mixed cast, in a room talking about a crime. This is a four-hander play in a church talking about this one situation. And because the piece, as you said, it's so well written, there's only so much you can do to reinterpret it. Like with 12 Angry Men, you could change the cast. Instead of being a whole bunch of white men, you can make it a whole bunch of black women who decide to do the play. You could very much do it that way, and you could read it however you like. Now, with this, you can't really change the race or the gender of any of these characters, because it's the Catholic Church, and Donald Muller is the first black boy in the school, so you can't have Sister Aloysius or Sister James. The play is very structured in a way that it restricts what you can do in this.
Now, I would say to that, while I agree, you could, if you just want to get more diversity on the stage, you could pull a Hamilton and say that, yes, we have a black actor playing Sister Aloysius, but just as the actual Thomas Jefferson is not a black man, you have to imagine that this is... you
could.
I feel like audiences would by and large reject that. Certainly general audiences would. And it's not as sweep you up in the, liberal Obama era optimism of something like Hamilton. It's a song and dance musical, just go with it. But I think, again, just getting back to semiotics, you can you would have to do that, but within the fiction of the play, you can't change the races, because that is very important to how these certain characters engage with each other.
Exactly. you couldn't do a production where instead of being set in Boston, it's now set at the turn of the century in a Canadian residential school. Mm-hmm. Like, there's no way you can really do that because
you would have to rewrite it entirely.
You'd have to rewrite it, and that doesn't quite work with this play. As you said, it's so well written, excuse me, well woven together that there's really no room to wiggle. So once again, the reason why you do it is more for you have some actors who are really good. I mean, I've been walking in that I'm like, I'd love to see a Broadway revival with Kathy Bates playing Sister Aloysius. I think that would be a solid casting. Or we talked about Stratford doing it and casting some Stratford actors. Like, the reason why you do this play is the same reason why you do 12 Angry Men or 12 Angry Jurors. It's because you have a cast in mind and you're programming it for them specifically. Not so much of, I have a new interpretation I want to do. This is the interpretation. This is what the play gives me. I'm now doing it because the actors have something to say, or this is a dream role they really want to do, and so they're going to do it. And I'm there to kind of get the piece up on its feet and let the actors, if you have really good actors, kind of just play, you know? And that's kind of that. Not to undercut the wonderful direction by Stewart, because he does take a good direction leading this piece to kind of find the humor, find the pacing. But if you have a good cast, that definitely alleviates some of the pressure off that, because a good cast will find that as well, you know, and it'll be a very cohesive relationship. So I say, what can we do with Doubt? There's not so much from a directorial production standpoint. You do it more because the message is still there. We're still having problems with organized religion, whether that be Catholic, whatever. There are problems across the spectrum with organized religion. So there's a lot there you can talk about. There are still doubts in the world. And I think this is a timeless story, unfortunately, where there will always be people who abuse power, and then there are people who try to seek out to prevent it. So I think the messaging is always going to be there, because we always have doubts in the world, no matter where we come from. It's just, once again, you do it for the sake of the actor. The actors have something they want to do. They have something they want to say. Like, I would direct this just because I would love to work with actors on this. This is a great acting class play that you could do with a group of actors. Assign them scenes and just say, let's just do it as a workshop. Let's just run these scenes, and you can really chew on it and play. And that's the joy of this piece. And that's why we do it, is because the message is still strong about doubts, about the systems that we have in place, and it gives the actors a chance to really play. And that's the same reason why you do plays like 12 Angry Men and these other really tightly written, consolidated plays that are usually in one setting. They're a smaller, more intimate cast, and it's just a lot of Game of Thronesian conversations taking place behind closed doors, and you're just kind of there to watch the actors work, you know, and that's kind of why you do it. And then you kind of already led into this question, which is, does the film have a definitive version? You said yes, it is the definitive version that and eclipses all the other stage versions. So I don't know how much more you have to add on that.
Yeah, I don't have more to add on that, but it kind of, I guess, I would pose this question to you as not just, does the film eclipse all stage versions? Because I think we are in agreement that it kind of does. I guess the question is, does that negate the need for further stage versions? I would say, sadly, yes. As much as I love this play, I would kind of rather just watch the movie, because if the best compliment we can give these genuinely talented actors is you didn't just copy this really other great actor, then I'm sorry, I think I might just want to watch that other great actor.
Right. I mean, I'll say for me, I wouldn't say the film was definitive. I would say it's the most accessible version of this play. So because it's the most accessible, of course, majority of people are going to watch it. Whether you're going through Amy Adams' canon, Viola Davis, Meryl Streep, Philip Seymour Hoffman's canon, it's easily the most accessible, and it was adapted by the playwright. Yeah. You know, so it's very close. The dialogue is basically verbatim. There's just a few more added scenes and extended sequences, like the one scene with Sister James, which that first scene is stretched out over several different instances versus just one long dialogue scene in the office. So, I mean, I would definitely say it's more the accessible version, but I wouldn't call it the definitive version, because if you have a good actor like Deborah, like Emma, like Brian, like Kim, who can put their own spin on the role, even if it is still very much, we, having seen the film, are imposing our thoughts about the film on top of these actors. If you have a good actor, they will definitely give their own, maybe a hair difference performance. That's what it is. So I would definitely say, yes, audiences would probably go to the film before they go see the stage movie, because this isn't widely done. Like, it's never been revived on Broadway, even though it's really easy to revive, considering it's a small cast, small set. But, like, we did, like, it's not done in the West End. I'm sure it's done more regionally, like this. But it's one of those things of, it's going to come up, and, you know, like, some audience, I mean, just because we've seen the film doesn't always mean audiences have seen the film, even though probably they have. But, you know, there's always the few in the world who haven't, who are always, like, there was the one moment when we were watching it and we find out that Sister Aloysius lied. And there were people in the audience that gasped.
Yeah, and this production is... there was a lie. So this production is precisely for them, because it's not doing anything like, you know, the story, but we're putting a twist on it. It's precisely a production for the people who don't. Yet it is also, in my view, profiting off of the familiarity that people have with the movie, and most of the people who are familiar with it, probably because they've seen it. Like, there's an interesting passage, actually, why I know that there was even a can stage production of this is because I don't know if you've ever read Jordan Tannehill's tiny little book, Theater of the Unimpressed. I feel like I've talked about it on of these episodes before. Yeah. Whereas he kind of, he talks like the whole thing is very hipster-esque, like theater in Toronto or in Canada isn't very vital. There's interesting things happening in the world, and we gotta get some of that, like, in Canada. You know, I disagree with a lot of what he says in it, but I think he makes some compelling, like, arguments throughout, like, but I guess he mentions at one point that, like, Canadian stage, the big regional theater that we have here in Toronto, that for a while, I forget who was artistic director prior to Matthew Jocelyn, when Matthew Jocelyn was AD when the book was written. But he's like, the previous artistic directorship was just making all kinds of, like, very milquetoast, lazy decisions. Like, the movie Doubt came out, so we'll do a production of Doubt. Right. And, I really feel like if the most ideal audience is the audience who hasn't seen the movie, I get the sense that all productions, especially that one that's in the immediate aftermath of the film, but even this one, are profiting off of the coattails of, you've seen the movie, you love the movie, now come see the play that inspired the movie. Yes. But if you have seen the movie, you will not gasp at those twists because you know them.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, you definitely won't gasp, but I think people who have seen the movie will be shocked. Because they're going thinking, oh, we're going to see the kids, we're going to see these bigger scenes, like the dancing scene where they're learning how to dance and do the mashed potato. We're going to see a few more scenes. We're actually going to get to meet Donald and witness his bullying and his ostracization by the students. Or we're going to see Donald come in and put his head on the table, and Father Flynn acting suspiciously by putting a shirt in his locker. We're going to see all those moments, but the fact that the play doesn't have that, I think definitely people who haven't read the play but have seen the film will come into this going, wait, what is this? Like we're missing scenes. Like, it's very interesting. Yesterday, I did a live stream where we talked about the musical Chicago on my other podcast. And I've just seen it in Stratford. And there's a big change in the courtroom scene. If you haven't seen the film, basically there's a sequence where Velma Kelly is called as a surprise witness. And it turns out there is a diary entry in Roxy's diary that Velma has stolen that basically says, I shot the baboon. You know, like, I shot him, I killed him. And then Billy Flynn gets up and kind of infers that really this was a ploy by the prosecution to frame Roxy Hart, and that helps get her off at the end. Now, I'm watching this in Stratford, and that scene never happens in the stage show. And I was shocked. I was like, wait a minute. Whoa. I mean, I definitely think the film is a definitive version of Chicago. But there were legitimate moments where I was like, wait a minute. Hold on. We're missing a big character moment for Velma and Billy, where you find out Billy staged this whole journal diary charade to help get Roxy off. And I gasped the first time I remember watching the film going, oh wow, Billy kind of pulled the fast one on the court. He did a razzle-dazzle move. He brought in the celebrity, they did a reading, you know, he drummed up some entertainment and won the day. And so that's where I'm like, if you're not familiar with the play and you go in just having seen the film, I think there is something there for you to kind of go, okay, this is a different reading of the scene. A big confrontation scene is the same. Like, there's no real changes. There's a few different one-liners, like the fact that Strelwich's light blows out and she comments that blew out her light. There's a few little one-liners that are different. For the most part, it's relatively the same, but it's just, there's enough differentiation that I feel if, like, my mom came to see it, having not read the play, but having seen the film, she may go, oh, that's not there, that's interesting, and seeing a different interpretation. But once again, it's so minor that you have to be a big fan of the film to warrant yourself going to see the play in the first place. You already know the story.
sorry, last point, and then we can move on. Like, I guess the difference between what you described with Chicago and Doubt is, because you're right, the film does add these like little, sometimes silent, sometimes just dialogue move to a different location scenes. I really like the one, like, people have mixed feelings about this. I quite like it, the scene where, you know, we see the male priests are all like laughing and having a good time over dinner, and then the nuns are all very like quiet, stoic, and
has the gristle off off the chicken.
Yeah, like
she spits it out.
I love that scene, and I'm obviously not bothered by its absence in the play, but like, I think it's very clear, maybe just to me, because I'm a dramaturg and I know like the play and the movie both so well, but like, it's very clear to me that's Shanley in the director's chair being like, these are things I would have loved to put in the play, but would have made it too complicated, too many moving locations, parts, whereas I kept it all confined. So when I see those in the movie, I'm not like, whoa, the movie's doing something bold and different. And when I see the play, I'm not like, where is that scene with the gristle? Like, what you're describing in Chicago is there's actually like a big plot point that is very different. And I don't see that as an apt description of the difference between the film and the play of Doubt. That's the last thing I'll say on the subject. We can move on.
Perfect. Let us know your thoughts in the comments.
Yes, please do.
We'd love to hear your thoughts, and we'd love to converse with you about that. All right, last question, though. Brian, do you think Father Flynn is guilty?
Yeah. No, sorry, that wasn't me being like, I think he's guilty. Like, no, it's just like, like, I just love that we're ending with this question because, like, you know, this is the town hall that, like, you know, to provoke the discussion. Here's why, as much as I love this play, I don't think it actually does necessarily succeed at provoking the dialogue that it thinks it does. Because there is no answer to whether or not Father Flynn is guilty. And that is why the play is so strong, because and it allows itself to be open to interpretations one way or the other, but Shanley writing it could not have written it in mind with, yes, he is guilty, or no, he is not. What makes it work so well is that, like a Schrödinger's cat, both are equally true with every single line of dialogue. And I don't know if this is necessarily how Stewart approached his direction for this, but certainly if I was directing this play, I would take the actor playing Father Flynn aside, and I would say to him, listen, you didn't do it. You are completely innocent, and that is, with that in mind, you play every single line. Then I would take the actor playing Sister Aloysius aside, listen, he definitely did it. And with every single line, you know from me, the authority, the director, that he is guilty, and that is how you play it. Both things are true, and you can just as easily interpret, you know, the inverse, and that's how each actor kind of has to. Now, I would also maybe add a caveat, because we kind of do have to have that final scene when, you know, Sister Aloysius reveals that, like, you know, by being concerned about calling the nun, he gave himself away. And I think this is how I would certainly interpret Brian's performance here, is that the decision that was made is he didn't do it, but he is gay.
That was my interpretation.
Yes. And I think that is also what I would tell the actors, like, you didn't do it, but you do have a secret. As a man of the cloth in the 1960s, you cannot let anyone know that you are a closeted gay man. And doesn't mean he's a pedophile, obviously. But because those are clearly not synonyms. But, you know, when he's concerned that what did that nun tell you, it's because he does have a secret that did come out, and that's why he's changed parishes so much. That's my interpretation, certainly how I would handle it, but the play doesn't even give us that much definitively. There is no definitive answer, and that's why this is such a playground, and why we can have the legitimate doubt about whether or not he's guilty.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for me, looking at Shanley when he wrote this play, which was in the early 2000s, after the 2000 Spotlight article that basically outed all these priests for their horrible crimes of assaulting these young boys and girls in the church, I definitely feel like in the time, like in the early 2000s when this was first done, I'm sure there was very little doubt that Father Flynn was guilty. Now, in our we're close to almost 2 decades later, there's definitely more nuanced, more gray interpretations, as you've outlined. Like, I would absolutely tell the actor playing Father Flynn, you are gay, that's why you left your last few parishes, They find out you have to leave town, and what's his name?
Donald,
yes. Donald comes out to you in the rectory. That's his confession.
Yeah.
That he comes out, and that is your secret, and you know the cost of that secret getting out, so you're trying to protect Donald, who is not coping well with this. We have this confession, so he drinks the wine, blah, blah, blah. Spin it from there, as you will. So I definitely think, as you said, there is a playground of how you would do it. I definitely would hope that production never takes just the black and white approach of Father Flynn is guilty, Sister Aloysius is right, even if she does have her own doubts because she lied about the situation. But there are definitely ways you can read it. I mean, we went into a whole side discussion back in the day about his fingernails. And the symbolism of having long talon, or not talon-like, but definitely longer, clean, claw-like fingernails, you know? Like, there's definitely, Shanley actually said, he does a great job of answering the question. He is, for sure, leaving it up to the audience. And if a production is good, just like we came out going, I think there's more to this than just he's guilty. And that is what is needed to really kind of sell this piece. The actors may have an answer for themselves, but they should never portray it to the audience.
Yeah.
So is Father Flynn guilty? I really think that's up to interpretation. I would say in the early productions they did of it, absolutely, there was no doubts that having been produced, I think it was 2 or 3 years right after the Boston Spotlight article, that there was like, yeah, no, this is a guilty priest and we will play it as such. Like, even if some people want to believe otherwise, I think I never saw the original production, but just looking at the time period when it premiered, I think there's enough inferences that you could read it that way should you want, you know. So
and like part of where my brain goes with this is I've always been a little puzzled by the end, like specifically the very last beat where Sister Aloysius breaks down. Oh, Sister James, I have doubts.
Yes.
Because we just find out a moment before that she has succeeded in her crusade to oust him. She believes that this has confirmed what she was certain of all along. And yet at the same time, he's been promoted by going elsewhere. So she has achieved her objective of removing him from her parish. And also he has received a better outcome elsewhere. And where I kind of think with this is that when she's breaking down at the end, well, don't worry, Sister Aloysius, because let's look at both possibilities. If you are right, then you still got him away from Donald. You have achieved that goal. And, will he transgress later? Probably, if he is guilty.
A dog that bites is a dog that bites.
Maybe. And he's learning that he faces no real material consequences to what he does, so he's not giving good cause to learn his lesson. But whatever, she shouldn't be sad about what she's done, because she still achieved her goal. If her doubts that she finally experiences at the end are valid, and he is innocent, and she's like, I was so certain, but now I'm starting to doubt, well, don't worry, Sister Aloysius, because this actually wasn't a punishment for him. You pursuing this as intensely as you did not actually destroy his life. If it did, then I could understand you being sad about your doubts, but was I right? And, I obviously understand that, this whole thing being a metaphor for Catholic theology, a parable, quite literally, it doesn't really matter. It's less about the material consequences that happened to this one man in his career and more about her faith being shaken, or specifically her certainty being shaken. But I always kind of look at that last line as gut-wrenching as it is, especially when you see a brilliant actor like Meryl Streep or Deborah Drakeford doing it. The second it's over, you think about it well, don't cry. It's okay either way.
That last line, there's so many ways you can read it. I mean, the pain of that line is that, as she talked about the whole piece where she said, it was fine, in the pursuit of good, you have to take a step away from God. And she acted as if that never affected her. And I think that's the power of that scene, is you realize the weight of her crusade. That this strong, stoic, cold woman who proclaimed in the first scene, who said, I do not have a heart, I like being aloof, I am cold. But then throughout the piece you realize, she was married. She lost a husband in the war. So clearly she at some point had romantic, heartfelt feelings. And then she turned to the church when she lost her husband, there's so much things there where you realize, wow, like you, like a true gray person, having doubts in what you did and whether or not you achieved your goal and the way you achieved your goal. Because, as they say, the path to good intentions is like paved with blood. Like, it's never a clean path. And the fact that she has to come to terms with what she did, I mean, she committed the mortal sin of lying. And she believes, and I mean, the question is, does she believe herself when she says it's a good thing, it affirmed his guilt, or is she only telling herself that as a soothing mechanism of, I chased a man out and my lie worked? Probably.
Well, at the end of the day, she's Catholic, so she could just confess that sin and then have a clean bill of moral health. Like,
yes.
I don't know.
Yes, but who does she confess her sin to? That is the question. Like, probably the Monsignor.
Probably.
Yeah. Well, that was the one thing that kind of irked me, is they kept calling him the Monsignor. It's like, no, it's Monsignor.
Okay.
So that was like one thing where like my ear caught, and I was like, no, other way. Okay, because you said it right the first time, and then you swapped it to Monsignor. I was like, no, Monsignor. It's the Monsignor. Either way. But
that's
the
the note we end on.
Yeah, that's a fun note to end on. But yes, Ryan, do you have any doubts about this production?
Like, it's a good production of a great play that maybe doesn't need any more good or bad productions of it. That is just my final summation of everything I've said so far. If you've never seen Doubt before, go see it. If you've never seen it live and really want to see it live, go see it. I have doubts that you'll get much more from that experience than you would just get reading the play privately yourself or seeing the very good movie. That's all I have to say. Perfect.
I will say, for me, as I say with everything, go ahead and see some live theater. Support these productions, because, like, this is a very inaugural production of this company. They've done something really lovely with it. Like, it's a solid piece with a solid cast. So go on out there, show your support. And I mean, definitely let us know what you think about the piece once you see it and choose to go. The links will be in the description where you can purchase your tickets and such.
And you're right, this is the debut production of this new company. I await with bated breath for what they do next. I guess, like, let's see, like, is this just going to be a company that does standard versions of tried and true road-tested plays, which is fine. But if I find out that's what they're doing for the next production, I might be less excited than some kind of bold new take on something or a new work, or like, breaking and entering theater, my eyes are on what your move, I guess. Awesome. Like, whatever you do next, looking forward to seeing what that is.
Love it. Okay, well, on that note, we're going to end it here. And then the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. I did it backwards. My bad. There we go.
Okay. Satan will get you for that.
Well, being left-handed, I always screwed it up as a kid. I always went right to left, and it's left to right. So, there we go. Either way, so Ryan, give us your classic Ryan Borochovitz send-off. Where can they find and follow you in your wonderful flannel shirts?
I feel like every time I'm down on a production a little bit, or say like some spicy, more controversial takes, I feel the need to plug my social, I guess. Just, again, I'm happy to keep these conversations going and have dialogue, so if anybody, really like wants to discuss with me further my hot take on this play, send me a DM on Instagram. I really only use it for this reason. So I'm at Ryan Borochovitz. It's just my name, all one word, all lowercase. I'll put it in the description of this. If you want to talk, DM me there, I guess. Otherwise, no point in following me on social media. Just send all that love to Cup of Hemlock instead. That's the show you're watching right now. Like, share, and subscribe.
Perfect. And you can follow me at Mackenzie on all social media platforms. If you're interested in musicals, I do have a musical podcast called Before the Downbeat. Our wonderful associate producer, Jill, has done an episode where we talked all about Avenue Q, and then she's already done a live stream commentary of the movie musical Cats from 2019, and she'll be back this Friday talking all about Little Shop of Horrors. So be sure to come check all those out. We are going to be we're working on season 5. So if you want to get yourself ready, there's 4 seasons worth of content to check out before the 5th season drops later this holiday season. So definitely take a look. And I guess until then, everybody, stay healthy, stay safe, and peace be with you.